Good evening to one and all. First of all, I would like to welcome our chief guests over here, Dr. ASIM MALHOTHRA and Dr. ANJALI, HOODA, and all the doctors and people from the medical field who have come here to know more about this. I think it's not false to say that this has been truly a people-led movement for low carbohydrates in Kerala. So there are a lot of controversial questions around this. A lot of doctors, cardiologists, a lot of specialists, endocrinologists coming against the diet, and some rather legitimate concerns. So I'm hoping this session you will come out with a lot more clarity at the end of the session. And so in the beginning, I have got some cool questions from some of the participants. So I'll be throwing those questions at Dr. ASIM MALHOTHRA and Dr. ANJALI, HOODA. And after that, I'll just open the session to the audience, and you are free to ask whatever you want to ask about this topic. Is that fine, sir?
So, is it worthwhile me just having a little background?
I'll be asking that.
Okay.
Start with that.
Okay, right.
So let's start with the beginning. With Dr. ASIM MALHOTHRA, like, how did you become this? Let's say you went on this interesting journey from being a conventional cardiologist, doing your share of angioplasties, angiograms, and all that, to someone challenging this orthodoxy regarding sugar, statins, and just being this sort of, I don't know, health guru or something. So yeah, this.
So my background is I qualified in medicine in 2001 in Edinburgh University in Scotland. And I then, having done postgraduate examinations, decided that I wanted, quite early on, to pursue career in cardiology, and that too, I subspecialised in interventional cardiology. So we go back about just over 10 years from now, previously. And in the UK we have had this issue, in fact global issue, of obesity, increasing obesity. I think 2004 the World Health Organization announced it being a global problem, the obesity epidemic. And on a personal level, I work in the National Health Service in the UK. As you probably know, we have a universal healthcare. It's free access to everybody. And it's a very efficient system. It works very, very well. But I was noticing that there were more and more patients coming in with obesity-related problems. And as you know, as you have more chronic disease, you have more medications, more difficult to manage patients, more complex patients. And that was increasing. And my own take on this, at that time I was a specialist registrar in cardiology, so I was still a junior doctor. I came to the conclusion that this is not sustainable. This is not sustainable in what I'm experiencing, what my colleagues are experiencing, and what the data, the statistics and data was telling us, which we were hearing about in the news quite regularly. So I went on my own journey to try and look into what can be done to curb this obesity epidemic. And obviously one of the main drivers that most people will agree on is the overconsumption of junk food, ultra-processed food. But a lot of people were consuming these foods without realizing what harm it was doing to them. A lot of the marketing of the foods, a lot of the way it was sold to people in the public was being marketed as healthy, when in fact, as we learned later on, and that was another part of my journey, is discovering the issue about sugar and the research on sugar and its impact on metabolic health. I had to then try and expose all of this stuff, because ultimately we have a healthcare system which is not working, is failing people, is not managing these patients properly, and we have to change this collectively. But unless people know what the tools are, what they can do, then we won't be able to overcome it. So a lot of my work and my activism, as well as working as a clinical doctor, and recently I was made a professor of evidence-based medicine and a visiting professor in Brazil, has been around this issue. Now, one of the things I would say that I'm quite, the evidence I think is quite clear, is that our obsession, and this is all linked to our obsession with cholesterol, has indirectly actually caused considerable harm to public health. Because LDL is not a significant risk factor as we have come to accept. I'm not saying it is not a risk factor, it is, but it's a much smaller one than people realize and understand. And by focusing on lowering LDL, either by lowering saturated fat in the diet or mass prescription of cholesterol-lowering drugs like statins, indirectly what has happened, it has driven obesity by increasing, giving people the illusion of protection from statins, because the overwhelming majority of people don't benefit. Even people with heart disease, the overwhelming majority do not benefit. So what's happened is it has increased this consumption of low-fat foods, refined carbohydrates, and this actually is at the root of the problem. Now, when you look at the hierarchy of risk factors, what should we be focusing on? What I spoke about today, earlier on in the conference, is insulin resistance is the #1 risk factor, if you like, for heart attack. It's precursor to type 2 diabetes. It's responsible probably for about 50% of hypertension. And if we focus on that in an effective way, then actually we will overcome a lot of these problems. The prevention will be sorted out. Even patients with certain chronic disease can be managed better. And when you look at the overall evidence, and we obviously will discuss this now further, because there's a lot of myths out there, a lot of people who have been told completely wrong information. I mean, I would say, you know, sometimes they are literally being lied to, unfortunately. It's not just in India, but in the UK as well. They're being lied to, or they have been lied to, weirdly, by their doctor, unwittingly. You know, doctors giving wrong statements and saying this is harmful, etc., etc. So we can address all of that, hopefully a lot of that today. But you know, the overwhelming evidence suggests, certainly from my perspective, looking at all of it, that the first line approach in managing type 2 diabetes and even heart disease should be focusing on insulin resistance. And in the diet, that means ultimately cutting out the refined sugars and starches, you know, and to different levels for different people. But that is where we're over-consuming these sorts of foods, and often in ultra-processed form. Ultra-processed food is the major issue. 50% of the diet in the UK is now ultra-processed food. And when you look at the breakdown of the components of what are these ultra-processed foods, these packaged foods, most of it is starch and sugar. It's not fat. The fat content is very, very less. Yet most people are still worried, fat is going to give you a heart attack. Fat is going to make you fat. This is all complete nonsense. In the real world, this isn't what the trial data shows us. Actually, for managing type 2 diabetes, low carb certainly is much more effective at cardiovascular risk factors and even weight loss. And managing type 2 diabetes is superior. And what's also good is that it seems to work for the patient. It seems to be an option. A lot of patients who have tried different diets and everything, that seems to be the one that seems to be the most sustainable so far, because there's no counting calories. You know, ANJALI, HOODA, my colleague, you know, said it's relatively easy to do. You don't have to think too much. As long as you know what you're cutting out, you just eat till you're full. So really, I think that's really a lot of what I've been doing. On the other side of it, a little bit, which if people want to talk about statins and about the pharmaceutical industry and the bias of research, you know, that is another big problem. Over-medication, also linked. We've over-medicated people and we've detracted from lifestyle. The balance needs to change. If we want to sustain our healthcare system in the next 10, 20, 30 years, we need, across the world, a gradual de-prescribing process. We need to reduce the amount of medications people are taking, and we need to shift towards lifestyle, because these medications are causing a lot of harm. Peter Gosha, the co-founder of the Cochrane collaboration, and people will debate this, but it still tells you that, you know, gives you a bit of context. His own estimate suggests that the third most common cause of death globally now after heart disease and cancer is prescribed medication. What your doctor prescribes for you. We cannot allow this to continue as a medical profession. If we really want to help our patients, we cannot allow this to continue.
I think it was Christian Bernard who said about, you know, if he had moved into preventive health, he would have saved, I think, 10 times as much as people. And coming to you, Dr. Anjali, you know, I sort of relate with you, because you had this massive journey from you were once 1 or 2 kilos, and now you're fit. And so at one time I myself used to weigh 125 kilos, and you know, I'm still on the journey going on. So so you did your medical school from here, and then you went abroad, did your internal medicine. And why functional medicine?
So functional medicine actually came much later. Obesity medicine came first. So I wanted to get into obesity medicine because I thought that is the where I feel something. You know, I wanted to help people. It's totally, surely out of passion. I didn't know how much money I'll make. I didn't know my future. But functional medicine came later because I developed some autoimmune condition, and I went looking for answers, and allopathy had no answers. And I searched everything, and then I stumbled upon. So I went to US for a regular holiday. Spoke to my ex-boss, and he told me, "Listen, you're just minutes away from functional medicine. You should do it now." And when I did it and I applied to myself first, I was cured, and it was merely through foods, and I was very shocked. So that's why functional medicine is now a major part of my practice.
No magic pills.
No magic pill at all.
Okay. So, Dr. ASIM, one of the turning points you mentioned is, and I love this story. Like you talk about this patient who was admitted post angioplasty and who was served burger and chips while in the hospital, and him asking you, like, how am I going to get better if this is what you guys serve us? And you talked about ultra processed food. It's a major part of our diet, and like 50% of the UK population's diet. Almost, I think I've read something like 60% of American population. I don't even want to talk about India. I don't know. So, how did we reach it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we've allowed too much commercial influence in medicine, both in terms of the how we prescribe, how we practice our medicine. Is a lot of doctors unwittingly don't realize a lot of the guidelines that they're following are biased. A lot of the guideline boards are biased because they have people who have financial ties to the drug companies and have been selective with the evidence. They don't reflect the totality of evidence. So there's a huge bias there, which ultimately ends up supporting more the drug companies than the patient. And similarly with the food industry. The food industry has had so much control, they've managed to make their ultra-processed food, if you like, available to anyone, anywhere,
And cheaper
at any time. Yeah, even somebody who's in hospital, who's actually being served junk food. You know, it's become normalized. So we've got to a point where this is just, you know, going along this track, and then suddenly we realize, hold on, this is we need to, if we're going to really solve this problem, we need to just change that, you know, change the food environment. And it's actually not just about education, because, you know, 50% of National Health Service employees, we have 1.4 million employees in the NHS in the UK, doctors, nurses, admin staff. Half of those people are also overweight or obese, doctors and nurses as well. So either the education's wrong, which we know I think it is to some degree, lack of appreciation of this impact of diet, but also more importantly, the hierarchy is about what is available to us, what is easily available, what is cheap, easy, you know, on the go, accessible, etc. These, you know, vending machines, sugary drinks, potato chips, biscuits. This has become normal, regular part of the snacking culture. This is affecting doctors as well. And then for me personally, I think, well, hold on a minute. If we have to start in our own backyard, because it can't be that easy for a doctor who himself is worried about his, you know, how can a doctor, I mean, I'm just giving this concept here. Do you think that a doctor who's obese can effectively give dietary advice to a patient who's obese? I mean, it just doesn't make sense, does it? And it's not to fat shame or say, you know, this is we're collective, there's so many people in this. So we have to start in our own backyard as well, because otherwise, if we don't set the example, it's very difficult for us to tell our patients that.
I think liberalization sort of, like, it brought a lot of development really in 1991 when we opened our economy, but at the same time all the KFCs and the McDonald's and everything came, and we had literally the god of cricket, Sachin, saying boost is the secret of my energy, and the Khans going on Pepsi, Coke wars. But I think I sometimes think that was the last decade over there. And so, just to clarify, in your diet, how many teaspoons of sugar do you say is healthy in a day?
So you don't need any. So for biologically, there's no biological requirement for sugar. We talk about sugar, we talk about, you know, table sugar, sucrose, which is 50% glucose, 50% fructose. There's no biological requirement whatsoever, so you don't need any. So zero, I would say the optimal value for consumption is zero. But of course, People like their treats. We have this culture in India, as you know, sweet tooth, sweeten the mouth after any customary. And in fact, that's another issue again culturally, that this is something that. But I'm glad you asked that question. So the World Health Organization now recommends a maximum limit per day of 6 teaspoons. 6. Okay. 1 can of Coca-Cola is about 8.5 or 9. So if you don't have any other sugar in the day, you just have 1 can of Coke, you're already over your maximum limit. In the village I studied in southern Italy, Pioppi, which is one of the healthiest villages in the world, where there was traditionally very low heart disease, people lived to 90, 100. And we asked them, sugar was not consumed, very little sugar was consumed. So we asked them how often would you an southern Italian diet, which is mainly a lot of vegetables, olive oil. They did have some pasta, but in small amounts, but no processed food, oily fish, etc., etc. How often do you have sugar? And we asked them, these are the people that have very healthy longevity. And they said, we only have sugar once a week as a dessert on Sunday. That's it. Think about that. Once a week. And how many people here are having something sweet once a week? Very few probably, right? We're having it much more regularly.
No, we are in Malabar. We can't.
So it just gives it context. That if you, from a health perspective, as a purist, because also forget about metabolic consequences. I'm sure a lot of people can get away with small amounts of sugar and probably will not cause any metabolic disease. But only 2 teaspoons a day, from 2 teaspoons on very little sugar, already that starts to cause tooth decay. And you can't counteract it by brushing your teeth more often. It's too strong. So even from a point of view of tooth decay, which is a big cause of illness, I mean it causes, it contributes to increase in health expenditure, but even for the patient,
for the kids,
in the UK, the most common cause of chronic pain in children, in young children, is tooth decay. The most common cause of hospital admissions in the UK in young children is tooth decay. And again, the single biggest factor behind that is sugar.
I mean, that's incredible. And I read the book, I've got it here. I'm not promoting it or anything, it's a good book. But, someone might ask you, that's POPs, they eat their pizzas, their pastas, I'm sure their tiramisu, whatever, their dessert.
But the thing is, that's what we wanted to look into. You see, that even the modern Italian diet now is very different to that traditional diet. So it was just trying to understand it. So pizza was eaten once a fortnight. This pasta, starchy carbohydrates, this has been at the base of the food pyramid, which again essentially came from Italy. But their consumption is much, much less than what is being commercialized now. So when you have that at the base of the diet and you add on top of that sugar, and it's a metabolic disaster. If you're very active and you don't have risk factors for metabolic syndrome, you don't have type 2 diabetes family history, which a lot of Indians do anyway, then you can probably get away, and you're very active, you can probably get away with consuming, certainly in young to middle age adults can probably get away with consuming more starch. I have no doubt about that. But actually, insulin resistance anyway is an age-related phenomenon. A lot of people will develop it as they get older, so you're going to become more intolerant to this. So we've got to think about that as well.
Dr. Anjali, I want to come to you. So how do you deal with patients who come and ask you, carbs are so yum, I can't deal without my parathas and all that?
Yeah, so what this first step is to not eliminate what they eat.
Okay.
Because then they'll run away.
Okay.
And then nobody wants to follow very restrictive, strict diet. It's just not possible. So I would make changes right away. The first step would be to make the paratha a little healthier by adding more fiber and vegetables to the stuffing. Second step would be to make it half and eventually take it off. But that takes about weeks.
But our parathas are like pure carbs.
Okay, no, even North India is aloo paratha, right?
Yeah.
It's pure carb. It's aloo stuffed and made with ghee, fried properly. But we tell them to make changes, and those changes are not so significant to their taste, but they're quite significant to the calorie count. So first change is to change the type of paratha, second is to reduce the quantity, third is to eliminate it. It takes about 5 to 6 weeks to do this.
And finally you do reach a place where there's no sugar.
They don't want to have it eventually.
So I'm a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah. Sure.
I tell my patients to go cold turkey completely from day one. I say, this is an addiction. Carbohydrate, you're essentially a carbaholic. Okay, this is an addiction, and people are amazed how quickly they find. Because so I also speak from experience here. I'm not somebody who's just pointing my finger, but look at me, I'm really healthy, etc. I was very active, but I consumed a lot of sugar. As a junior doctor, I mean, growing up, I would have sugared cereal for breakfast, Cocoa Pops, and I always thought it was normal for me. I would be in the hospital, or even in school, 10:30, 11 a.m., very hungry. It was not even lunchtime. I was so hungry. Then I'd have a snack, I'd have a chocolate bar. Then it gets to lunchtime, and again, working in the hospital, we'd go out, I'd get a panini, I'd get pasta, I love eating, I'd eat all this pasta, panini. Then I'd go back to the ward, do a ward round, then halfway through the ward round, I'm feeling sleepy. Okay, fine. Then I go to the coffee shop and I get a mocha, which has probably about 10 teaspoons of sugar.
You're just describing my internship.
But this was me. So I was the same. I was still doing all that. I played cricket, I did a lot of sports, but I was consuming all this stuff, and I thought it was normal. And then at home, I love cooking. I'd make chicken curry and chow with rice or some spaghetti. And again, I'd feel hungry, and then I'd go and before sleep, I'd have some cake or something. This was normal for me for many, many years. When I looked at the sugar research and also realized that the adverse effects of sugar, especially for Indians, is independent of body weight. So it's not just about obesity and being overweight. I mean, probably about half of people with type 2 diabetes in India don't even have a high BMI. There's about body fat percentage. I have a family history of type 2 diabetes hypertension. So I started looking into all of this and I changed. But coming back to this approach, I was addicted to sugar. I didn't realize. So when I looked at it, I thought, I'm just going to stop completely all the added sugar I was consuming. And you have a little bit, actually have a little bit of withdrawal. Patients, I warn them, you might feel a bit for a couple of days, a bit headachy, not right, but it will pass. And people are amazed when they do that. Suddenly, after a few days or even a week or two, they suddenly don't crave the sugar anymore. Palate changes. And the same thing, for me, it was sugar first. Then later on, when I looked at more of the research on the carbohydrates, I then cut the carbs as well. The starch. But indirectly what happened was, a lot of people have this misconception, they think it's a very high meat diet. I mean, for some people they could do it that way. For me, I ended up eating more vegetables. My diet became healthier because I replaced the rice and the bread and the pasta with more veggies. Yeah. So I ended up having, I probably get through, I don't know, sometimes 7 to 10 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. Normal, 7 to 10 portions. So it's, there are slightly different approaches, but I do the cold turkey thing, and with the patients who've done that, this is where we talk about Ethiopian diet as well, and there's a famous politician in the UK called Tom Watson. He's the deputy leader of the opposition party, and he contacted me, and this is, the book got launched, you got some media coverage, you got another backlash from government bodies and dietetics bodies who weren't happy because I was, of course, challenging what they were saying. So they would then criticize it and make up all sorts of nonsense, basically. They didn't even have a debate, they just made up nonsense, lies, essentially. They lied about it. And when they started lying about it, then I realized we're really hitting the nerve here. Yeah. And a lot of commercial influence on these dietetic bodies. Coca-Cola sponsored them, Pepsi. This is just complete nonsense. How can they have any credibility if your organization is sponsored by the food industry? I don't understand. They have no credibility as far as I'm concerned to give independent advice. I'm sure the people working these organizations are very good people, but what their policy statements are influenced by industry, and that's wrong. So, this is something that, so this politician contacted me and he said, listen, I just wanted to thank you because, this is 6 months. In fact, I was in India last year when he contacted me by Twitter, and he said something like, I've lost 55 pounds in a few months from following the diet plan. I wanted to thank you because, and this guy was known, he's a very famous politician as an obese politician. Now he looks like a picture of health. He's lost 100 pounds in the space of a year.
That's around 50 kilos, something per day.
Yeah. And he said he's never felt better. He's 50 now. He said I'm able to, he's enjoying his life. He's got more energy. He's able to play soccer on the beach with his kids. He wasn't able to do that when he was obese. So he feels, I just want to finish on one quick point on that, is that when we think about the chronic disease management, when we think about managing blood pressure, when we think about managing cholesterol, and managing diabetes, these drugs may have some small benefit, definitely, okay? Preventing stroke, etc. Okay, minority will benefit, and fine. We need to, there's certain people we definitely need to treat with drugs. But what things these drugs do not do, even if they may prevent one outcome in the future, like a stroke, okay? The one thing these drugs do not do is improve your quality of life. In fact, if you get side effects, the only thing they can do to your quality of life is make it worse. Statins don't improve quality of life. They may have some benefit, but lifestyle changes will improve your quality of life for most people, and that too quite quickly.
So I think that's why I think this whole thing is very individualized. Like you said, you like to go cold turkey.
No, on sugar I like to go cold.
Too, yeah.
Not on the paratha.
Yeah, but so
They run away.
It's a different approach.
no, in the sense that I get both sets of patients. Some are like, no, I'm not going to touch anything. I don't want anything. I'm fully on in this diet from today. Then I get some like, okay, sugar I can, but paratha.
They always have this one thing that we.
So you know, and you raised both of you raised a very important point here, which we don't do enough in medicine. Is part of this evidence-based medicine triad, which this morning I showed with this slide from David Sackett, who's the father of the evidence-based medicine movement. Is we want to improve patient outcomes by using individual expertise, best available evidence, and patient preferences and values. Because if you don't really ask the patient what they really want to achieve about their consultation, you're giving them a bad deal, and it's not going to work. If somebody really can only do it from a gradual process, you say go cold turkey and paratha, maybe it will not work for them. So you have to think differently.
I read that you said providing you cut down refined sugar and processed food, eating fat is likely to make you as fat as eating green vegetables. That's a controversial statement.
I was quoting Andreas Enfelt, who is a doctor in Sweden. He's launched a website called Diet Doctor. It's very good, actually. I tell my patients you should look at it. It's an independent website, it's not commercial. Yeah, dietdoctor.com. It's lots of videos, interviews, they give recipes, that kind of thing. It's the most, I think, successful read website on health website in the world now. Yeah, so he says, providing you cut the ultra-processed food, but providing you cut the carbs, eating fat is about as likely to make you fat as eating green vegetables to turn you green. It will not do it because fat itself on its own is very satiating, keeps you full. It has the least impact on insulin and glucose, and insulin is a fat-storing hormone. So we look at those two things.
But Dr. Anjali, aren't fruits healthy? Like fruits are so healthy. Like aren't we supposed to eat that?
Fruits are it's like having a sugar craving.
Yeah.
And if you have to choose between an Oreo biscuit and a fruit, I will choose a fruit. That's the only difference. Other fruits are not as needed by the body.
I read somewhere that fruits are just candy in nature.
They are. And they're mostly cultivated now for commercial. First, there was only wild fruits.
It wasn't available all the time of year. Fruits traditionally.
And I don't know if you have seen this. There's this very interesting photograph in dietdoctor.com, like how our bananas looked 50 years back, and how a pineapple looked 50 years back, and it's completely different.
Yeah, it's a much higher, sweeter.
Yeah.
The fruits have become sweeter.
Yeah, that's right. So, coming to this fear of, we talked about fats right now. Like, where did this? Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with ANJALI, please. Like, how did this? And there had to be some study that was so widely accepted that we all one day just woke up and started fearing fats. So how did it start?
So Anselkey's hypothesis was based upon the fact that saturated fat raises cholesterol. And what he found in the 7 country study, he looked at a few countries around the world and found a correlation. We published data showing a correlation between saturated fat consumption in these countries and heart disease and death. But as you know, as doctors, correlation doesn't mean causation. And the strength of the correlation wasn't that strong when you look at other countries, which for some reason he missed out. There wasn't that strong a correlation. So this is how it actually started off. And of course, cholesterol was something that was very strongly linked to premature death from heart disease, but only really in people with familial hyperlipidemia, with a genetic susceptibility with very high cholesterol levels. If you take most of the population looking at the Framingham study, which is where we took risk factors, unless the cholesterol was very high, total cholesterol of over really 10, I don't think those are the units you have, million multiples here, unless it was over 10, or less than 3.8. So people with genetically, because cholesterol generally for most people is genetically determined. You can influence a little bit by diet, certainly, some people a lot, but a lot of it is genetically determined. The people who have genetically low cholesterol levels have less heart disease, and the people at the other end of the extreme had a lot. Okay, then became really a global thing, which was a low-fat food movement. Get the exactly. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Get your fat consumption down, and in theory, it could have been healthy if the resulting increase in carbohydrates had come from whole food, from vegetables, but it didn't. The increase in consumption in carbs came from sugar and starch.
we reach the cereals and oranges, the healthy breakfast.
Exactly, because there's no fat. It's fat-free.
Yeah, low fat.
Low fat, fat.
I get so irritated whenever I go to a supermarket and I take a cup of yogurt and it's written low fat. I'm like, I want fat.
And if you look at the sugar content, it's probably very high because they have to take the fat out and replace it with sugar. So you're processing the food from its natural form and adding sugar. And in fact, I actually tell my patients now, and I'm very public, I say this on TV in the UK, BBC, Sky News, I say, you know, if it's marketed as healthy, if it's marketed as heart healthy, if it's marketed to proven to lower cholesterol, if it's marketed as low fat, don't eat it because it's likely to have the opposite effect on your health.
I also love your like the key point for the common public to understand what is processed. Like if it has more than 5 ingredients.
Yeah, ultra processed. There's different processing for foods, but yeah, ultra processed, 5 or more ingredients on the packet. Eat it very sparingly.
And also like a lot of chemicals which you don't even understand. So
That again, that science is emerging more and more. We think, you know, maybe these additives themselves are having some adverse effect on the gut microbiome, on, you know.
So I want to ask about how important is fats in a low carb diet. So we say it's high fat. So I'd like to talk about also. So how important is fats? Does it really have to be a high fat diet? And
See, fats are very satiating, small proteins. But a lot of people, let's say it's a vegetarian LCHF, they cannot eat meat. Some of them don't even eat egg actually. So if you don't give them 70 to 80% fat, they won't be hungry. So we correct butter, cheese, and cottage cheese and fried cheese. I mean basically sauteed cheese, fried cheese, some things like that, so that they don't feel hungry. So that's why fat's very important.
I'm just curious, how do vegetarians do this? Because you need to have a maintenance protein every day. So if you don't take eggs, you don't take meat.
Cottage cheese, paneer is a very okay thing.
Okay.
I use a lot of soy paneer, like tofu, which is made in India, very reasonable priced. I do that, and then there is nut butters, almond butter, peanut butter. Then nuts are there. I use these kind of things, and they sort of get by. Yeah, it's a tough with vegetarians.
But do you give like? So I always thought that they have to take supplements. I don't know how.
I do sometimes, but it's not an LCHF I need supplement. It will be more on a person who's malnourished or someone that I will need to use a protein supplement, like whey powder.
And coming to the saturated fat, we are in Kerala right now. And if you ask maybe 20 years back, like all of us, this is a land of coconuts. Like our Kerala literally means that. If you ask our grandmothers and all that, we were using coconut oil and ghee. And suddenly today you go to all the households, you see sunflower oil, you see safflower oil, you see rice bran oil, you see, I mean,
It's wrongly advertised, it's because rice bran oil, I remember there was a paper on it that is very polyunsaturated fatty acid and blah blah blah, very healthy for heart, but it's there. I remember there was a time I was studying in the US, there was canola oil on top of the, everything, nothing but canola. There was a canola butter, there was canola oil, there was canola everything. And suddenly when the results came that, oh my god, the canola is poison. And then suddenly everybody has to stop eating canola. So I think good old ghee is okay.
We also, and notice that we also use all these oils for, we love our deep fried stuff like pan puri and all.
But ghee, you can deep fry ghee, no? It's high smoke point.
No, that's what I'm saying.
But it's
when you do it, all this deep frying in vegetable oils, I'm sure.
Oh, they become rancid because see, they have acrylamides when you heat it. Their acrylamides are produced. Those are acrylamides.
Okay.
Yeah, and they are directly poisonous to your every cell of your body, especially French fries.
It's not good. Coming to you, Dr. ASIM, You said, even today I heard this, that medicine is not an exact science. It's more an art of dealing with probability, something like that. Please elaborate on that. What do you mean? I mean, I went to medical school thinking I'm going to learn 100% science. And then practicing all my prescriptions are based on science. So what are you saying?
Yeah, well, it's not a true science. I mean, certain things are maybe more scientific than others, but a lot of the decision making, whether it's managing blood pressure or the risk factors, etc., about probabilities, isn't it? It's hard probabilities. So in that sense, it's not, and that's why I teach my medical students. In fact, one of my reasons I went down this issue about statins, where I found a very big discrepancy with my clinical work of seeing patients and the side effect prevalence in those patients, versus what was published in the clinical trial data. There was a huge difference. I was noticing that probably about 1 in 5, maybe more, were getting some kind of side effect, which was unacceptable to the patient.
On statins.
On statins, interfered with the quality of life. Yet the trial data was telling us much less than 1%. So this made me a bit suspicious something was going on. And to try to get to the root of that, then I realized there are probably a lot of patients out there that the doctors wouldn't have known that they were actually the symptoms they were experiencing were a side effect of statins, because if they trusted trial data, didn't think about it, as you know in medicine, unless you think about something, you'll never diagnose it. And it comes down to trying to work out what's actually going on and realizing that a lot of these trials are very selected and very biased towards producing better outcomes and minimizing the harms. So this is all about use of data and statistics as well, you see.
So coming to think of that, I don't think we are even taught how to critically evaluate literature, medical literature, or like I was just telling you earlier, I didn't even know what's the difference between an observational study and a randomized controlled trial. And also there's this huge hole of lack nutrition education in our syllabus.
Yeah, so those are two big issues, big problems. So to deal with the modern chronic diseases, we need to be empowered. And it's not complicated, it's not rocket science. I'm the same. We didn't get taught anything about nutrition. Certainly nothing about the impact of diet and nutrition on chronic disease management. There's nothing. It's now being introduced gradually, and I've been somebody that's been pushing for that in the UK, along with other doctors. But that's lacking. That needs to be in the curriculum.
Can I just mention that case of that absolute risk versus the relative risk?
Yeah, I mean, very simple statistical issue is that a lot of the okay. So I remember meeting somebody who worked for 2 drug companies, and when I gave a talk somewhere, he's quite a senior guy, and he came up to me, and I gave this talk, and he told me that actually it was the drug companies, not academics, that came up with relative risk, and they use it to market their products. So
what does that mean, relative risk?
So let me give you an example. So if you have a clinical trial of statins in stroke, let's take a trial, type 2 diabetics, and you give them a statin every day for 4 years. In the placebo group, the people getting the dummy pill, so who didn't get the statin, there were 28 strokes out of 1,000. What did the statin add to the trial? It reduced it to 13 in 1,000. Sorry, to 15 in 1,000. There were 13 more people who were saved from a stroke out of 1,000 who took the statin, right? Which is 1.3%. But if you look at the relative risk reduction, it's 48%. 13 out of 28.
Put it that way.
13 out of 28 is 48% less likely to have a stroke. So for the individual, what does that really mean for the individual? It's only 1.3% chance, or 1 in 77. So the absolute risk reduction is 1 in 77, and that is a much more transparent way that makes sense about how much benefit you're likely to get as an individual. The relative risk, 48%, sounds it's exactly the same, but it sounds much higher. And for the patient, they will exaggerate, or the doctor will think of the benefit in a much bigger way, when the reality is most people are not going to benefit. Right? Most people who take the pill are not going to benefit. So there's a 1 in 77 chance from that. Now, I will then add in with all of everything else I've learned about what's going on in the system. And I tell my patients this when we have this discussion. I say, listen, patient asks me, okay, this is best case scenario because, and patients get this is a drug company sponsored trial. The drug company's there to make money. They're going to give you the best results. They're going to be selective in the results because people with side effects are taken out or not reported on. So I say, if you do not get side effects, this is my view, if you do not get side effects, and you take this tablet religiously every day for the next 4 years, then there's a 1 in 77 chance you'll be prevented from having a stroke. But I don't often, but I say most of the side effects, I'm honest, are reversible, you get them, but maybe 1 in 3, 1 in 5 get something, which is muscle aches or erectile dysfunction or memory disturbance or gut issues. And that's an issue, you see that? And we look at statins, they are efficacious in the trials, but are they effective? It's two different things. Are they effective in the real world? Most people who are prescribed statins in the community stop taking it within a year, and they say because they got side effects. So that then, you know, who's really benefiting from this? This is a problem. And at the same time, people like that. But what do you do about it? I don't know.
The thing is that a lot of these people, triglycerides go down.
Yeah.
HDL
They're
goes
actually,
up.
everything is healthier. Yet you suddenly got this rise in LDL. What do you do? Some of the people I've seen actually, I've done calcium scores on them or CT coronary angiograms because they're worried because they're being told to take a statin. They don't want a statin. And so you can do that and see whether there's any established heart disease and repeat it in a few years. Also, interestingly with FH, I've seen a number of patients with familial hyperlipidemia. First diagnosis age 55. No one's ever checked their cholesterol before. The cholesterol is through the roof. I mean 20. LDL of 15. Okay. So this is my thinking. They've had FH all their life. They've had this high cholesterol all their life. It's not been treated. It's through the roof. So high. By the age of 55, you're going to have some heart disease if this is a risk factor for you. If this is a risk factor for you, by the age of 55, untreated, super high cholesterol, you're going to have some heart disease. All patients I've seen in this who've come to me like this, they've had CT coronary angiograms, completely normal. Not even a single bit of atheroma in the arteries.
Anyone in the audience to ask questions about sugar, cholesterol? Yeah.
Yes, I got a question.
Just a second.
Doctor, please just take a break.
Just a break for 5 minutes.
Hi. I heard that you're comfortable eating 6 spoons of sugar. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a diabetic patient, and normally I take morning tea with half a spoon of sugar, and evening tea also with half a spoon of sugar. That leaves me with 5 spoons of sugar. Just saying. I want to know what is the normal size chapati equals to in number of sugar. Number of
It really depends on how whole wheat your chapati is.
How?
So how fibrous it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes the flour is just like maida.
Yeah.
So then it's more, it will be about 2 teaspoons of sugar.
One
per
chapati.
chapati. But if it's more fiber,
Yeah.
the net carb goes down. So it will be like 1 teaspoon of sugar.
And 1 cup of rice will be equal to how much sugar?
It will be 2 tablespoons.
Tablespoon.
Yeah.
1 cup of sugar.
Yeah.
1
One
cup of
cup
rice.
of white rice. There's no fiber in white rice.
No, normal rice.
Normal rice, white rice. Normal rice is white rice.
Yeah.
Actually, the normal rice should have been the brown rice, the matta chawal, the brown,
Yeah.
which still has the cover on it.
That's
Yeah. So the white rice is super processed. It has really no fiber.
You're saying that is 2
Almost 2 tablespoons because it's 30 gram carb.
Okay.
So 30 gram carb is 1 teaspoon is 5 grams of carb,
Okay.
right?
But
So if you calculate.
that 6 teaspoons is the WHO recommendation.
So, but the thing is that recommendations are usually,
But
yeah, it's very difficult to convert it to your real life.
Low,
Lower the better, none the better.
none the better is what he said.
And I also take 2 good day biscuit in the morning. So
Okay, so you don't really the sugar in good table.
Completely out of it. Not recommended product.
I have a few questions regarding the basic something.
Loudly, please.
I have a few questions. First of all,
Mr. Naik.
is it a node or none phenomenon? If I have to go strictly on LCHF diet, or if I reduce my calories and decrease the proportion of carbohydrate, whether it will be beneficial?
Yeah, so if you're going the thing is that some people are not able to do strict LCHF. Let's face it, we have a different life, we're just different people. But if you want to start, so calorie counting will be the most useless thing to do. The best part would be to lower your carb to as minimum as possible, which means your grains, rice, pasta, sugar, pizza, whatever. So reducing the grains will be much more effective.
Stop snacking.
Snacking, yeah.
Snacking.
Yeah.
A lot of people benefit just from stopping snacking. They go back to our grandparents were 2-3 meals a day.
Yeah.
If you just do that, that in itself will be a big impact. Actually.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not strict. You don't have to do a strict LCHF. First, you can start with lowering your carb. Working on that will be very effective. So once your carb is lowered, you automatically then you will find other ways to fulfill your body's calories, and then when you are eating fat and protein, you'll be fine. Initially, it's a little tough.
And second thing, whether there is any long-term study about the effects and side effects and about the
They're long enough. I think there are at least 10-15 year studies are already there. 10-15 is already there. And I think it's still continuing. I haven't searched the whole database, but I saw a study starting from 94.
Yeah, this is what I've been asked by everyone.
25 years ago already done. In 94.
What about the side effects? Like,
Yeah, this long-term worry thing is again fear-mongering coming from industry. People don't like, a lot of people are going to lose money from this low-carb diet because people coming off medications, people who are involved in the cholesterol issue. The fear of cholesterol is actually a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yes.
And the people creating this long-term, because I'm involved right in the middle of this. I know all the players. I'm involved with all the people on both sides, know what their motivations are, know what their backgrounds are, and I can tell you, this is being thrown by the people who are opposed to low carb, saying there's some long-term damage, fear of long-term. In fact, I was speaking on BBC News recently, BBC World News, because there was a study that had come out suggesting low-carb diets shorten lifespan, and it was complete nonsense.
Yeah.
It was complete nonsense. There was nothing scientific about this study whatsoever.
Something in a conference.
It was complete rubbish. And this is what we're up against. You see, we've got the commercial influences. The bigger issue now is how we tackle this. How do we make medicine, medical science research better quality, so we don't commit mistakes that we've already done in the past that have really affected millions and millions of people and probably led to their premature death because of bad science. But to answer your question, no, I'm not aware of anything. I said this today again. I mean, listen, who knows, right? It's always possible. It's possible something will come out and show some kind of harm. But there doesn't seem to be a biological reason how that would happen. Because all in the short term, all the cardiovascular risk factors get better. So then what is if you have a low-carb diet that isn't well planned, then maybe you may not get enough fiber or whatever else. And these things, but in a well-planned, well-executed, low-carbohydrate diet, it's a very, very healthy diet. Very healthy diet.
I think a lot of the mistakes happen when you're not educated about the diet and you just go. Sometimes some people think it's a meat-eating diet, like we just eat a lot of non-vegetarian stuff and all that. So I think the important thing is educating yourself about the diet before you start.
Yeah.
And third, part of this, from your experience, whether you have any reason incidence of the cholesterol, white stones, because cholesterol turnover is higher, and any higher incidence of uric acid stones, gouts, and another factor, if you are promoting this thing, cauliflower at all. So the cauliflower from Brassica family is said to have goitrogens. So any increased incidence of goiters.
So that's three things. He asked about gallstones.
You said about stones, then this cruciferous family, and
gallstones.
Yeah, uric acid.
Uric acid or gallstone.
Uric acid, gallstones and goiters.
Okay, so gallstone is a possibility. Why I'll tell you, because if you lose the weight fast, it can happen. Anybody who will try to lose weight fast, gallstones are very likely to develop. But they are more at risk for women. very clearly, in every study, the women are more at risk of gallstones than men.
50% of the population have gallstones anyway.
Yeah, whether they cause the problem or not.
50% of people have gallstones anyway. Take an ultrasound probe here, you'll find 50% of people have gallstones. But whether it causes a problem or not.
Yeah, that's the precipitation of stones. Plus, uric acid actually improves. Uric acid will improve. The only problem is that if you think it's a meat-eating diet and you give your body bombarded with purines, then there's a problem. You have to understand that vegetable intake in this diet is equally important, and that we forget. Like Dr. Asim was saying, he's already taking 9-10 portions of vegetable in this diet. So low carb, high fat does not mean high protein. In fact, there is only 20% protein in this diet. It's not a meat.
Yeah, so I think you asked earlier about the fat, high fat.
Yeah.
By definition, if you cut, there are 3 macronutrients, okay? Fat, protein, and carbohydrate. Protein is always kept the same, pretty much 15 to 20% of calories. That doesn't change very much. So by definition, yes, if you cut the carbohydrates, you are going to increase the fat intake. So that's how it becomes high fat. So, yeah.
There's also, it's good that we are in the question of protein. So a lot of people ask about, will a low carb diet aggravate kidney disease because it's high protein? You take a lot of protein.
Yeah, so there's no data. There's only 1 or 2 studies that show people who've already got kidney failure, very high protein, but the quality of that data is not very good and it's not been replicated. So the honest answer is you cannot reliably say that high protein diet has any adverse effect on kidneys as far as I'm aware. But as we said anyway, it's not a high protein diet.
It's a moderate.
Yeah.
A lot of vegetables these days are carcinogenic in terms of the pesticide being used. So adding more vegetables to your diet.
I know there's an issue in Kerala, I only learned recently, that people have a fear of vegetables because of their use of pesticides. I think it's a global problem. I think we're all, this is a,
I mean, when I was a kid, when I go to market and buy vegetables, I know there are all types of vegetables, you know, the sort of fading colors and all that. But now if you go to the market, everything is so fresh and green and fatty and, you know,
There's one solution
it's nice.
to this. Only one solution.
There's one solution to this, which I feel that you should start growing your minimal vegetables at least in the pots. You don't need a garden. You don't need backyard. Honestly, a pot. Yeah, and it's very easy. I mean, it's really not tough. I do that. I do that in my house.
What vegetables do you grow in your pots?
Spinach, lettuce, bhindi, tomato, pumpkin. These all are growing in my pot. I have a balcony. I stay in a flat. So they are all growing in pots. The thing is that they are supposed to be bigger pots, and instead of flowers, you can grow vegetables, so that your family can consume. Like dhania is there, pudina is there. I'm also growing parsley. I'm growing pretty much everything in my pot. I have at least 50 pots in which something or the other keeps growing because one is finished, the other starting. And it's very easy. You can learn this in literally 15 days.
How about the wheatgrass?
Wheatgrass you can grow. We grow as North Indians. We use wheatgrass even for puja. Wheatgrass is most easy to grow. And growing at home is better than getting the wheatgrass juice outside.
So I think there was a confusion about, we said that WHO recommends 6 teaspoons of sugar.
Maximum.
Maximum. But you don't agree with it, do you?
No, listen, I think that they look at from, no, I don't disagree, a maximum limit, yeah? But I think that for health, optimal, listen, WHO is also influenced by industry. They could have, no, I mean, it's well known, they could have produced this guidance in 2003, but they didn't produce it. Because George Bush, the president, then threatened to withdraw funding from the WHO because he had influence from the sugar industry. This is how bad the situation is. You know, the industry, local authorities they're not independent. This is another campaign. We need to sort this out. We need to get this information that we're getting from drug companies, from researchers, academics, or it needs to be much more transparent. It needs to be more independent. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to have 6 teaspoons a day. I would say 0.
Definitely not for a diabetic.
Yeah, absolutely.
One question is, we all know that all the metabolic syndromes we are addressing is due to overnutrition. It's not because of lack of nutrition, excess nutrition or overnutrition. So in this context, we all conditioned to have 3 times meal or 4 times meal, as he said, timed. So the fact coming to my mind is something, you need to deal with the hunger. You can just survive by sun, you can survive by, water, there are people. So the fact is how to deal with the hunger. You don't need this much amount of 6 portion or you're so conditioned from the birth on that. So do you have any kind of aspects to put, how to control the hunger?
Yeah, so it's called low carb. It's called low carb. One of my friends and colleagues, Jason Funk, some of you may know, who's a renal physician in the States, and he's been quite prominent in social media on pushing this issue about obesity and looking at it. He says you can tell people to eat less, but you can't tell people to stop feeling hungry.
Yeah.
The question is, why are they hungry?
Management problem.
Why are they hungry? This is a biological, hormonal problem linked
Or
to
is it
sugar.
a conditional problem?
It's also sugar. Sugar and carbs just keeps you constantly hungry. We talked about this. So, our grandparents, our ancestors weren't counting calories, right? Because their food was whole food. It wasn't ultra-processed, high sugary.
Sometimes they were eating
and they were eating their full, exactly.
hard to die.
But the modern food keeps you feeling constantly hungry, and the availability of it is a problem.
This is from personal experience also. As a person who has lost something around 30 kg, like if you go on low carb, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who practice it, you don't feel hungry. I can easily go, like even if I'm somewhere, I can go without food 18 hours something. I think one of the beginning signs that you are making a good low carb diet is the fact that you are not feeling hungry sometimes.
Yes, so what is the longest follow-up study so far?
Loudly, sir.
The longest follow-up study so far.
About?
About this low carb diet.
Yeah. So if you look at the best quality data is going to come from randomized controlled trial data. So RCT data, I interviewed actually the researchers who did this study. It's only 2 years. 2 years looking for type 2 diabetes, comparing low carb with low fat. So traditional, actually healthy low fat diet. So low fat diet that wasn't full of lots of starch and sugar and versus a low carb, healthy low carb diet. And low carb was superior. Low carb was better on blood pressure, better on cholesterol, better on glucose. It was superior, significantly superior in the first year, and the significance reduced after 2 years. It was still better. So the data is there. The reason people don't know this is it's not publicized. It's not publicized because it's not money publicized.
Many patients who are diabetic, they are stopping the treatment because they don't need it. When sugar comes down, there are many beneficial effects. But what is the long-term effect on the body? What is the long-term effect on the blood vessel? Is there any postmortem study known?
No, but what we have to give at least give
regarding atherosclerosis. It said that.
But it doesn't make sense. How can, if the cardiovascular risk factors all get better, why would you develop atherosclerosis? Tell me.
No. You see, we know that atherosclerosis starts very early in life.
Yeah, so we won't really know that for a while because the low carb, this movement has only really started in the last maybe 5-10 years. And right now we have people who are really following it, a lot of data being gathered now. We won't know for a long time about the long-term impact of atherosclerosis, but
we are giving a lot of protein. We are giving probably a bit more, fat than what was recommended so far. So there is concern.
Yeah, so
amongst the medical fraternity.
Yeah, there is concern, but it's unfounded. It has no basis. It has no scientific basis whatsoever.
There is no scientific background. There is no follow-up study. In the other one, there are years of studies.
Yeah, we have the low-fat food movement for the last 30 years. We've got epidemic of obesity and type 2 diabetes. This is the long-term impact of our other advice. This is what's caused that.
Population. You take about Eskimo. They're taking this sort of diet only throughout their life.
Eskimos.
Eskimo
Eskimo diet is 70% fat.
Yeah.
They have no heart disease.
We know that. But there are people that are probably used to that. The system is used to that. But exactly the opposite group. In Nigeria, they are making lot of carbohydrates, fat also. But they have probably very low
cardiovascular diseases.
Yeah, I'm not.
There are certain other things which we don't know yet.
Yeah, of course. But as you say,
And we don't know what is.
we don't know. We don't know. But at the end of the day, we have to do with what we think is best. Certainly,
We don't know what is happening in patients with hypercongenital hyperlipidemia. There's not enough of studies.
Yeah, the hyperlipidemia patients, their triglycerides and HDL improve significantly. Their insulin resistance gets better. I see this all the time. Patients come to me. There are people going on ketogenic diets. A guy, I give a case study of a pilot who basically adopted after a heart attack. After a heart attack, adopted a ketogenic, a very extreme low carbohydrate diet, and now he's breaking his own records in triathlons. I'm running marathon and swimming 10 miles and cycling 100 miles in one day. And he is in the optimal health. It is unbelievable. And he has had no progression of his coronary disease at all over 5 years. And he's been on ketogenic now. These are anecdotes, of course. We need much more we need more data and more people. But there doesn't seem to be any plausible biological reason why this particular diet is going to be harmful. And when you look, I was involved in this paper that shifted the understanding of heart disease. What is really heart disease? It's a chronic inflammatory condition, and it's a chronic inflammatory condition that develops when you compare it with metabolic risk factors, insulin resistance. So if you look at chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, and if people accept, most people now in the cardiology community do accept that atherosclerosis is caused by these two major risk factors. If you look at the data about the impact of low carb on these, they get better. So if we accept the heart disease is a chronic inflammatory condition which is influenced by insulin resistance, and that is at the heart of it, and there are lots of factors that influence that. If we accept that, and then we have a dietary or lifestyle plan that improves all of that significantly, then theoretically this should not cause heart disease. But listen, it's a multifactorial condition anyway. Something with stress. I don't just approach it all just with diet. I say, listen, this is multifactorial. This is another important issue. We shouldn't just focus. With diet seems to be the most dramatic, effective impact, but we have to look at stress. I'm a big promoter now of meditation. I think there's a lot of data coming out now that the impact of meditation on health is dramatic and very profound. There is a cardiologist in ABDUL, which is a city in North India, Mount Abu, and he has published some data where he has put his patients, people who refuse bypass, people who refuse stents, and he's an interventional cardiologist working in conventional hospital, and he puts them through, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's something called a Raj Yoga. And he then, for 1 year, and he also encourages better social interaction, better family relationships, and he repeats the angiogram after 1 year, and he's reporting in more than 50% of the patients there has been regression in the coronary stenosis, regression, and his only intervention is the meditation, and some Ayurvedic type diet, but the main thing is meditation. So I think that we need to think about all of these things together. And a bit of exercise, walking.
We treating physicians are really confused as to what to do. We were taught to use that in high doses in many conditions, but there are concerns about that now.
Yeah, so to answer the question, so David Sackett said, this father of evidence-based medicine, 50% of what you learn in medical school, 50% of what you learn in medical school will turn out to be either outdated or wrong within 5 years of your graduation. The trouble is you don't know which half, so you need to keep learning. So it's fine if we learn something 30 years ago and it's completely wrong now. Who cares? It's fine. Things evolve, things change. There are operations that we used to do which we now know are harmful and wrong because we believe them to be correct because we have more information, we have better data. So we just have to keep being open-minded about this.
Concerned about whether there is any bad effect.
Well, show me the study or data showing a bad effect, then we have to look at it. But I'm not aware of any, and if anything, the data says the complete opposite. So go with the totality of the evidence.
By using protein in high quality.
We are not LCHF is
it's not high protein. It's the same protein as low fat. It's exactly the same amount of protein.
20%.
And then those patients with patients with high uric acid, etc., when you're taking a lot of protein, will there be any effects?
Yeah, I think I addressed this before also, and I think I'll address it 100 more times with all the doctors and patients that I see ever in my life. Uric acid, main reason for increased uric acid is carbohydrates. Main reason.
We don't know why is it. Is it certain rise in uric acid?
It's fructose.
Fructose.
causes-
Sugar causes increased
Sugar
uric
causes
acid.
increased
It's
uric
linked to
acid.
high blood pressure and increased uric acid.
No, I know exactly what uric acid does to the body. But when a patient comes to us for the first time or to you for the first time, there will be a uric acid of let's say 7.8 or 8. This is what we are considering as high. Very rarely you see someone as 11. I've seen mostly in the range of 7 to 10. Not higher than that, 7 to 8 actually. So when this patient comes to you,
The level of uric acid is not the in acute gout.
acute gout has no relation to uric acid. Serum uric acid may not be elevated. So we are talking different things. One is a gout and one we talk about uric acid. So when we talk about uric acid and increase does not happen with LCHF diet because as I mentioned before, if somebody is doing a keto diet with pumping up too much of purines in their diet, then the uric acid has a chance of increase which also does not increase. But what we recommend is low carb, high fat diet will never increase the uric acid, and actually I can send you data of more than 100 patients. More than 100 patients in my practice. I see about 15-20 patients a day. And like that, and there are papers. Also there are studies which are showing that ketogenic diet has been there forever. It's I think for 30, 40 years.
Maybe more than that.
Maybe more? I'm 44, so it must have been much earlier. I have first time to reduce weight, I have used keto diet. But I'm saying that the keto diet itself will not enhance the uric acid. Now coming to acute gout. Acute gout is completely different thing. Somebody who has precipitated gouty crystals into their joints may not have had a high uric acid level in the blood or may have had it brought down. But gout has no relation to the protein intake or purine intake because that is not what uric acid precipitation is different thing from high uric acid in the serum.
Are we saying prescribing, suggesting low carb diet for over-diabetic or our patients?
Yes,
Safely,
it's very safe.
Not just safe, it's the most effective. In fact, I think we're being, I actually think it's unethical. It's unethical to not prescribe it.
This is what we are taught.
It is unethical to not prescribe. Forget about that. Unethical to not prescribe it. Give them the option. When you have the data, it's there. It's clear. But the problem is a lot of industry and the guideline bodies and our medical professional bodies are not being selective with the data. They're using outdated information. So we need to challenge that. We have to be bold as doctors. At the end of the day, we are there to look after our patients. That's what we're there to do. So let's do it.
Plus, LCHF group in Kerala is so big, Doctor.
Our problem is that we are practicing evidence-based medicine. We are supposed to. And when
This
we
is
are
evidence.
prescribing things,
So what is happening
is normally recommended.
So low carb was always a recommendation. Low carb was always a recommendation to make people better, always diabetes, hypertension or heart disease. Low carb was always there. Now the high fat is the question. And people wrongly believe it's a high protein. It's not a high protein diet. It's not like we eat kebabs all day. It's not like that. So people are confusing it also. There's only, the fat is there, but protein is different. So we can use butter, we can use mayonnaise, we can use so many other things, coconut itself, but not too much meat. But low carb was always there. The question is the high fat. Now high fat for diabetics cannot be unsafe because fat does not spike insulin.
The problem is in front of low, where do we start? If a patient develops some complications after years, is there any definite, concrete evidence?
We are looking at the Kerala group to give us that concrete evidence.
The only thing concrete in life is that we're all going to die at some point. Okay? You can't, even everything we talk about in medicine, medicine itself is not even concrete. We don't know what's going to happen.
Medicine like, I don't know why we disregard all the weight loss, triglycerides going down, the HDL going up. There's a lot of good things happening to the patient when we put them on a low carb, high fat diet, and it's there to see. And for the question about diabetics and long term low carb diet,
I would like to say the story of Dr. Richard Bernstein. Wait. Just a second. So Dr. Richard Bernstein was a diabetic since 12 years old, and he's type 1 diabetic. He's 85 years old today. He has been having type 1 diabetes since the age of 12 in 1940s, and this man is fit and healthy today only because of one reason, and that is because he has been following a low carb diet till this day.
Yeah, it's also actually, we took type 1. This is actually being adopted by a lot of type 1 diabetics, and they're reducing insulin by 50%. So I know a lot of type 1 diabetics who are low carb. There's a member of the European Parliament. I spoke in the European Parliament last year. I was invited to speak there, and he's a type 1 diabetic, and he is in his 40s, and he noticed an improvement in his weight, but he reduces insulin. So it's also can be used for type 1.
Changing the mode. I mean, they are becoming more conscious about their diet. They were eating compulsively, see, just food for fun or food for pleasure. So it's more like becoming a balanced diet, you can say. So I just want to ask you about the impact of this diet on colonic flora, the gut flora, which is very essential for maintaining our immunity. And you were mentioning about the BBC report that it's cut short the lifespan, because they were not mentioning about the cardiovascular health. They were mentioning about the the cancer colon.
That's a good point.
That the nitroreductase and the azo compounds are being reduced to some of the carcinogens by the gut flora. So our food is also a fertilizer for the gut flora. So we have to take care of the 3 million genes of the bacteria apart from our 20,000 genes. So that is a very concern long term as you were talking about. One thing, because in the gut flora is healthier when we take vegetarian diet rather than non-vegetarian diet. That studies are there. So I just my experience, I just skip partly these meals. Some 10 years back, I just started this Atkins diet, one of a protein sparing modified fast diet. So the gut flora requires a lot of tubers and roots for short chain fatty acids, which are very essential for the colonic, the colonocytes, the health of the colonocytes. So is there any study regarding that? That's my question.
So you've said a lot of interesting things there. The gut microbiome is important, and actually in my particular POP diet plan, I talk about gut microbiome, and the foods that I incorporate into the diet plan, which includes lots of vegetables, are going to be good for the gut flora. Even dark chocolate is good. Apparently coffee is also good. The issue about the shortening lifespan was again the misinformation. The study was very badly designed to reach the conclusions that it suggested. But what was actually the heart of it was this issue about red meat. So there's still a perception out there that red meat consumption increases risk of colon cancer, and that is why there is a concern about low carb. But you don't have to have red meat in low carb. The other thing is, there isn't really clear evidence that the red meat, which is non-processed, is harmful. It seems to be that the something called nitrosamines that are produced when you cook red meat from nitrites that are added to processed meat, that can potentially be carcinogenic, and that WHO call that carcinogenic. And the risk of that is still relatively small if you have high red meat every day, and that too 1 in 100 chance of develop colon cancer. But only if it's processed. So I'm not really convinced about the issue of red meat so much, but at the same time, yes, I think that it's important to. I personally think that fiber is important, and in a well-planned low-carb diet, the fiber intake is actually much higher than conventional low-fat conventional diet. Something like anything from 35 to 45 grams. There's a paper, open access, BMJ Open. You can look this up, low-carb diet, busting myths. And it goes through all of these things, cardiovascular risk factors. It talks about fiber, and they do two typical meal plans in low carb. And the fiber intake is much higher than what's even been recommended. So the people who are coming out with these studies, they are also misinforming people. They have prejudice, and they're actually they think this is about red meat, etc. It's not about red meat.
and the fiber content is high. So therefore, overall, it's going to have a positive effect on the gut microbiome. But if you're vegetarian, yes, you can do a healthy low-carb diet on a vegetarian. You can do that, or at least a healthy diet. But the carbohydrates are not the processed carbohydrates. They're not lots of starch, not lots of rice. You know, it's a variety of vegetables. And the only concern I do have about vegetarian diet, especially in India, and my mother passed away recently, and I know this was an issue for her, and she was a very religious, strict Hindu vegetarian. She was protein deficient. You know, she died at the age of 68. She was wasting away, and she had a rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis, but you know, she didn't like egg. She would hardly eat any egg. And protein deficiency is a really big concern in India, especially amongst vegetarians. And if you have protein deficiency, you have reduced muscle mass, you have increased body fat percentage, and that is going to be a problem, especially as you get older. That's going to cause a lot of problems. So I'm very concerned about the modern Indian vegetarian diet. It is, you know, it's nutritionally deficient and it's protein deficient. So that needs to be corrected. I think Anjali might want to add to that.
Yeah. So North India, we have a lot of vegetarian patients. It was shock for me when I came back from US. So many vegetarians. For me, it was to revise the whole thing over again. But what I've seen is that because of religious reasons, Indians in the north don't eat non-vegetarian or even eggs, and some of them won't even eat paneer. So because of the big challenge, for those people, I will use protein supplements. A lot of vegan protein supplements are available.
But did we evolve, to be consuming supplements?
Yeah, it's very different.
I mean, I understand the religious aspect, but it doesn't make any biological sense to me. We're using marketed, factory-formed supplements, and we're saying this is a healthy way to live. This is best for our health. It doesn't make any sense to me, sorry.
Piggybacking on that, on the gut microbiome thing, I heard you say something about giving probiotics. So what's the role and what are the other supplements that you prescribe usually?
So most of the patients who are obese or who have diabetes and hypertension, they usually have a gut microbe which the microbiome is totally flawed. They either have a leaky gut syndrome, or they have bacterial overgrowth, or they have fungal growth in their bellies. And sometimes it will present as acne or dandruff. It will present as vaginal excretion, white discharge, or some kind of boils on the head or under the armpit or somewhere. So these are the signs that I would see in most patients. And then invariably everybody gets a probiotic for at least 2 to 3 weeks. And also along with cutting back on sugar completely, because we don't want the fungus or the bad bacteria to be feeding on the sugars. So, and other supplements I reuse and recommend all doctors to use is omega-3 fish oil, which should be wild Alaskan salmon oil, and capsule. Capsule is easy to have. And then, I also recommend turmeric or curcumin use to all the patients in this category especially. And rest, there are so many other supplements that it's individualized after that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, definitely especially our Keralites, the food habits of our Keralites has to change. And regarding the LCHF, for metabolic syndrome, all the things like diabetes, cholesterol, everything is related to the metabolic syndrome. For that, the low carb part is good. It's a highly recommended thing, and you need to just have it out and don't need an answer from you, from your experience. So the people here, they are bombarding with high fat. It's really high fat. So what is your experience regarding is there any acute complications regarding the high fat part?
You give your example of high fat.
No, people are bombarding here with meat.
How much grams?
Yes.
How much gram you take?
That's protein.
But lamb is very fatty. You have a lot of fat in the lamb.
Beef and lamb.
Good gram. So, what could be there should be a suggestions for people.
Yeah, you're right, because animal protein should not be consumed that much anyway.
Yeah, because they don't do that.
We have
Yeah, I understand that because they want to feel satiated. They want to not feel hungry. But once they're scared of the pesticides in the vegetables, as we heard. But the thing is, there has to be a balance. You cannot just keep consuming so much non-veg or red meat or beef, lamb until you're full. It cannot happen like that. So now comes the process of chewing. A lot of people are just eating, and nobody's chewing their food. Actual portion requirement of such patients. Since we are not counting calories, we have to be a little smart. You're right, too much of animal protein and fat is not required. It is only to suppress your appetite to certain. Once you're in ketosis, your appetite will go down and your automatically consumption should reduce. It should reduce within, I think, 72 hours. So if people are still eating after that, then it's a scare. For 72 hours, I won't bother much. 3 days is okay.
That message has to be conveyed.
So it is conveyed, sir, right? In the sense that if you are truly a low carb diet, you can't have much carb. You will, fat and protein are so satiating that you will feel so full.
Yeah, hunger goes away.
You can't just have, and in the Kerala LCHF diet, at least we give strict instructions that you can't go above certain amount.
I think we need to correct, maybe there's some confusion about when we say high fat, we mean as a percentage of your calories is higher fat. Doesn't mean that you're just gorging on lots and overeating lots of fat. It's the proportion of the calories in your diet is coming more from fat than from protein or, from carbohydrates. That's what it is. I think people may have this misperception out there. High fat diet means people are just gorging and just eating lots of fat continuously. It doesn't work like that. It's about the percentage of your total intake of calories from protein, carbohydrates and fat. There is more coming from fat. That's what it needs to be. And maybe better to even call it a high healthy fat diet. So what does high healthy fat mean? I mean, you don't have so much extra virgin olive oil here, but ghee, butter, coconut oil, these are healthy. Unhealthy fats we need to be talking about vegetable oils. Why is everything being fried in sunflower oil? This is an unhealthy fat. So we need to distinguish also between what's healthy and what's unhealthy fat.
And one more thing is, I was just going through a message which is being circulated. Okay, the diet change is helpful for preventing diseases. So there is a message, the LCHF diet can cure diseases. Diabetes, obesity, that's okay. Yeah. Next comes cancer, then Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, then seizures, and so on.
There are some studies.
Yeah, there are some. No, the evidence is strong, as you're right, for obesity, type 2 diabetes. The other evidence for other conditions, we don't know. There is emerging evidence. There may be some benefit.
No.
But certainly,
but one thing is just come cancer. Just cancer.
Yeah.
That means it's dangerous.
That's
because people
will get the wrong impression. They think yes, no, we shouldn't give them the wrong impression.
Yeah, that's right.
I think in terms of curing cancer, definitively there is not any evidence right now that it cures cancer. So we need to be very clear. There is no evidence right now that low carb cures cancer, any type of cancer. There are studies underway right now, though, to look at that, to see whether it reduces progression. We'll get the results of that, fine. Then we can comment. But right now, we cannot say definitively that low carb cures cancer. We can say that we know obesity, we know type 2 diabetes increases risk of cancers. We know that obesity risks of many cancers. So indirectly, yes, if you're helping your obesity and type 2 diabetes, certainly that can help. That's good. But no, we shouldn't be giving people false hope.
Because this is being circulated in Malayalam, okay? And in the banner of LCHF diet, it is being circulated. So, for any type of cancer, the people don't go for treatment. They'll go for LCHF diet.
Yeah,
This gives a wrong impression, definitely.
Yeah, I think we all have a share of over-enthusiastic supporters.
But as a LCHF body,
we do moderate. It's such
nobody in authority should be really saying that stuff. If it's some people in a group that's saying this, and that's fine,
Actually, that confusion comes. There is not an organized LCHF, but there are many people promoting LCHF in many parts of Kerala. It's not a one single organization.
So many channels.
Promotional identity. There are many people. My estimates are around 3 lakhs or 4 lakhs people are doing it.
Definitely, but such things,
Less.
it's will be dangerous. Because there are people like Mohan Balbir. He cures all cancers, but they come with complications later. So and one more thing is regarding the pediatric part, because we do have mainly insulin type 1.
Yep.
So how is your experience about pediatric type 1?
I'm an adult cardiologist, so I don't
Okay.
But I do.
So is it advised to do LCHF for type 1 in pediatric?
It may not be a bad idea.
I can point you towards the right book by Dr. Richard Bernstein, who has been doing this treating kids, adults, everyone with type 1 diabetes with low carb diets plus insulin. So what he has found is you need to take a small amount of insulin, and he himself is a living example. Like I said, for someone. No, he's there. He was in Facebook Live last week.
One number. Actually, before the invention of insulin, low carb diet was known for even for the sector, and even for adolescent pediatric diabetic population. And you might be heard of Dr. Johnson. He's the pioneer in developing the treatment even before insulin era and after insulin. Actually, he started as a pair with low carb diet for treatment for the premature diabetes. So currently, and that time also it was the low carb diet was prescribed for all type of pediatric epilepsies. It was actually developed for all sick not for developed for pediatric epilepsies. Now we use again, but it's difficult.
The bacteria has to break down the fiber or the prebiotic to produce short chain fatty acid, which is good for the gut fiber. But gut plays a very essential role in obesity in most of the diseases actually. So functional medicine is based on enhancement of gut health. So saying that probiotics, synthetic probiotics, which have been made with more than 10 billion colonies of bacteria, are used in patients who really feel that there is a bacterial overgrowth, actually candida growth in their stomach, or they have been on steroids, or they have been uncontrolled diabetics. Those people I'll use therapeutic doses of probiotics. But for people who are not, who are just unhealthy and who just don't live up, they eat junk food and all, for them I don't need to use a higher dose of therapeutic probiotics. For them I can just say have homemade yogurt, live yogurt, charge, lassi, some things like that. Even coconut you can make into a fermented drink. Coconut milk can be fermented and it's very high probiotics. So it's called coconut kefir in America, and I don't know if it's available here, but in Delhi it is available. So, and coconut yogurt is also made. Same like suppose somebody is dairy allergic or something, the coconut yogurt is also made. So your question first was probiotic. Yes, therapeutic doses should be used in patients who are very, very symptomatic for gut issues. Second, prebiotics are very important. So prebiotic can be like you are producing the acacia gum, or the prebiotic can be from the vegetables, your rajma, your beans. Those are all prebiotics which produce gas. So gas production in the body, like after eating cabbage you get gas, after eating cauliflower you get gas. It's not a bad gas. It's basically your bacteria is actively fermenting what is.
It's only bad for the people who are around you.
Actually, those who are suffering this constipation due to this LCHF, because they are lack of.
Prebiotic can be very useful for these people.
Yeah. So I get this sample. So it worked very well. They have good get higher.
Okay.
So that's why I asked you whether it is.
Prebiotics should be in your daily life. It should be a part of your daily life. Probiotics, on the other hand, can be therapeutic, and they should also be a part of your daily life, like yogurt, fermented dairy, some things like that. We have these kombucha drinks, and there's so many, bone broth. They're all great for fermented pickles. And old time pickles used to be there. Kanji is there, one drink made out of carrots in the north. I don't know if south. I'm sure south there is some fermented drinks also.
Old rice.
Like even appam and all that is fermented, fermented. I think all dosa and all your batter is fermented. Yeah.
It's okay, you can have a prebiotic stall next time, the next LCHF summit. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the discussion. I have two questions. The first question is, you're talking about LCHF and high fats. Are we talking specifically about saturated fats, or are we talking about unsaturated fats, the polyunsaturated, monounsaturated? Is it applicable for all the fats, or is there a difference between the different types of fats that we think?
All foods containing fat have all three: mono, unsaturated, saturated, poly. So I don't think it really matters. We should concentrate on whole foods. To be honest, I don't think it makes a difference.
That's because in our state, like, there is a way which actually says we have to take saturated fats and avoid unsaturated fats. So have you got any grounds?
You should avoid unsaturated fat.
Yeah, like unsaturated fat. They're actually asking to avoid all the unsaturated things and focus on saturated.
Wow, I've never heard that before. That's interesting.
So do you have any evidence for that, or is it just
No, listen. So okay, when I wrote this book, when I look at the research. The evidence, the strongest evidence of benefit for the heart, okay, the one food, the one oil, is extra virgin olive oil across the Mediterranean countries. And there's biological reasons for that being anti-inflammatory. It has a good impact on HDL cholesterol. It seems to be the one food that spans across the Mediterranean regions, which traditionally have low heart disease. The single common denominator seems to be extra virgin olive oil. And that is about 14% saturated fat, and most of it is monounsaturated fat. Okay? So it's probably something in the olive oil itself. I don't think it's about the saturated or unsaturated, that kind of thing.
So the second question is, I have heard a testimonial from a patient, LCHF back, where he says that his creatinine went down from 4 to 2. So my question is, if it is a CR, have you got any evidence, or is there anything that suggests that the role is there already damaged kidneys?
Yeah, so I'm not a nephrologist, but it's interesting. You say I've heard of these anecdotes. Of people's kidney function improving from low carb. So yeah, even nephrologists won't know the answer to this question. But I've heard this. I mean, I've heard anecdotes of people's kidney function improving on low carb. I don't know what the mechanism is, but I've heard this.
There are so many patients.
In our group, there are so many results.
Supposed to go for kidney replacement. Got better with LCHF.
Great.
Like Dr. Jason Fung, who is a nephrologist, suggests a low carb diet for diabetic nephropathy.
Yeah. So like when we actually adjust them LCHF, they have so many issues like hyperkalemia, hypophosphatemia, and usually advise to take diet on low potassium, low phosphorus, and so then do we have to look for all those things in LCHF?
Yeah. I answer that question during the day. We have to look at phosphate. If you're having a chronic renal failure patient and who has high phosphate, you have to take in account the dairy products. Too much cheese, too much milk, and all that yogurt and all that you have to take into account. But like butter, oils, they will not increase the phosphorus at all.
One last question, quickly, please.
This is the last one.
Yes, dear friends, my question is not to the faculty members but to the crowd.
Okay.
So I stand here. I'm so happy to hear a conclusion from this doctor. The doctor was saying that we should convey the right message to the patient regarding protein and fat. It's a wonderful presentation, wonderful conclusion. My question is that who will take this responsibility of conveying this message to the public? Who is responsible for this? The number one answer is doctors are responsible for this. Because patients always trust us. I have participated in the first national conference of LCHF conducted in Coimbatore on July 1st. There are 350 doctors participated in that program. We had paper presentation from gynecologists, dietitians, pediatrician, dermatologists, and everyone were there. It was a very wonderful program. But unfortunately, there was only 10 doctors from Kerala. Now, the discussion was there, and there is a little bit of resistance from our side. And if we are going to resist this like this, it will take more and more years to come to a proper conclusion and to give a proper guidance to our patients. And meanwhile, social media and social movements will take up the role, and we will be the victim of it. So just decide what is our responsibility in this scenario. We were asking our patients to have low-fat diet. Okay, we were asking them. And does that give us lesser heart attack in our country? No, heart attack is increasing. Did it produce lesser number of cancer patients or renal failure in the country? It was increasing. So we learned something from the university, taking our medical degree from the university, we learned something and we practiced. But unfortunately, we know that the scenario is different, everything is on the other side. So let us think different and let us learn things and let us take the responsibility and say to the crowd that we doctors of Kerala are ready to learn and understand and modify things in the right way where medical science approves. So all these misconceptions will be managed. So my appeal to the crowd is that the Kerala doctors should take up the responsibility of conveying the proper message to the patient and not being the rivals of LCHF or being a defensive mode towards this low-carb diet. There may be some misconceptions in the minds of the patients, the public. They may be eating tons of meat and fat. But we are supposed to guide them in the proper way. There is none other than doctors who is the number one responsible person for that. That is my appeal to this crowd. Please take it up. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the speech.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for being so patient and being such an inquisitive audience. Right now we have a small memento presentation as a token of our gratitude to Dr. ASIM MALHOTHRA first.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Just for the photos, please. Okay. Now to Dr. ANJALI HOODA. Thank you, ma'am.
Very good. Very nice. So nice. So nice. Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you. Very valuable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. I read your biography.
Special appreciation.
I'll be for
idea.